Advantage 1 is deterrence. Ukraine's Supreme Cabinet has escalated miscalc and Putin's motivations make it likely, told 22. Ukraine is a demonstration of Putin's willingness to change European security through force. Putin's goal has been to fracture NATO's cohesion and manifest dysfunction. Ukraine demonstrates Putin undertake highly risky measures. The Kremlin weakened the Baltic through subconventional methods, political war, info ops, violation of Baltic waters and airspace. The risks of deliberate provocations or miscalc are high. Actions take the form of seizure or breach of territory, attacks against CI or invasion. Putin can take advantage of rising tensions between minorities to escalate tensions. Russia can conduct incursions to test NATO resolve and undermine credibility. Putin will invade the Baltics now. Current deterrence fails. The plan's shift to deterrence by denial is necessary. Summers 322. Border is under attack. Aggression in the Baltic region seems increasingly probable. Threat of confrontation requires NATO response. Shift to deterrence by denial. NATO's current presence in tripwire force neither deters nor promises sufficient reinforcements. Russia's goal has been to close the gap to connect Leningrad to Russia and lead to nuclear escalation. NATO needs to act now. Our analysis of Russia is correct in this instance. Social movement of Ukraine 2022. It is high time the left carried a concrete analysis instead of reproducing without frameworks overlooking Russian imperialism. It's a terrible mistake. It is Putin, not NATO, who is waging war. Imperialism involves revisionist nationalism. Putin moved to an ethnic concept of Russianness. His aggression was legitimized by the return of originally Russian lands. Imperialism is fueled by the desire to change the world order. Putin's demand for NATO's withdrawal from Eastern Europe signaled Russia may not stop. Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia may be next. It is naive to demilitarize that would be appeasing Putin and will make countries vulnerable. Putin's regime offers no alternative to capitalism. It is an authoritarian, oligarchic capitalism. The level of inequality has risen significantly. In his worldview, the rich have the right to exploit. For political change to come about, Russia must be defeated. Baltic war goes nuclear. Nuclear disparity and escalate to de-escalate make it likely. Bridge 22. Russia has 10-1 advantage over the US and NATO and NSNWs. TNWs are meant for use against military installations. Of increasing concern is escalate to de-escalate. It assesses first use. With de-escalated conflict, these increased miscalc and escalation. Russia might employ TNW during the conventional conflict with NATO for preventing a defeat, consolidating gains, or freezing a conflict. Moscow attacks the Baltic, invoking A5. NATO responds. Moscow then contemplates exploiting a TNW. As a warning, NATO responds to lead to all-out nuclear war in the Baltics. The plan solves durable, predictable, and sustainable U.S. security cooperation through NATO wedded to cyber and AI boosts credibility, decision-making, and deterrence. Lucas 22. Improved exercises in the Baltic, exercises improve capabilities. The goal should be credibility. NATO ISR capabilities, including their interop, should be routinely exercised. Allied decision-making around sub-threshold threats significantly impact deterrence. Exercising escalation should account for hybrid tactics, which include influence of cyber attacks and new tech. AI decision tools and environments may be more cost-effective and faster. By building on U.S. security assistance, all of Europe will be safer. Improved ISR contributes to speed of recognition, vital in hyper-war situations. Countries should leverage autonomous surveillance, overhaul the classifications around data to ensure seamless info sharing. Within the alliance, rules are complicated and conservative, provide predictable, sustainable, and durable security assistance, enhancing deterrence, and unwavering U.S. commitment. Security assistance create interoperable capabilities. The Baltic states depend on allies to close capability gaps. The U.S. should program multi-year funding. A2AD deters invasion. Success requires AI and cyber integration. Britain in 20. Emerging tech and AI are shifting the balance back to defense. A2AD zones are comprised of ISR. ISR systems spot incoming threats. Computers allow algorithms to process thousands of images. It allows prediction of trajectories. The U.S. has been working on capabilities. This data will generate an early warning system. The network must be robust and secure. Computing tech introduces comms at a long range and impossible to break into. The digital network decentralized command and control. This removes headquarters as a single point of failure. A2AD soak up tremendous amounts of firepower without effects. Decoys and deception absorb firepower. A strike would consist of cyber attack to disrupt the enemy network, time to allow aircraft to penetrate A2AD. By utilizing ISR, the defender gains a nearly indestructible system. Cohesive security cooperation solves Baltic War. Kudla 22. Security cooperation between the Baltic is still more declarative than actual, caused by lack of leadership. Russia act to undermine cohesion and credibility. A conventional attack will be a combination with destroying CI. Cyber attack, cyber scenario will be the most likely. Large-scale attack cannot be ruled out. Baltic militaries can cooperate and increase credibility of NATO. The issues interrupt the ability to act coherently and efficiently. Different weapon systems bring different organization. following NATO standards and joint procurements arises from necessity. Inclusion of NATO is necessary for the collective defense of the Baltics. Over list 20. The defense of Baltic is based on the viability of NATO. Theoretically, the US can provide bilateral guarantees, but because of their location, the defense requires the involvement of allies. German, Belgian, and Dutch ports and railways, Norwegian and British fleets, and French rapid response can be best utilized under NATO. The US links to the Baltic through NATO. The signal of NATO's defense posture delegitimizes Russian aggression. Klein Nati. A flexible approach to defend the Baltics would be denial-based. NATO Baltics defense hinges on perception. Russia is deterred if it perceives NATO solidarity and preponderance of support. Area denial compares favorably to alternatives. It is a defensive concept that preserves the slow, allowing NATO to dominate the narrative. It is more palatable to NATO than offensive-minded concepts. Tech are making area denial attractive from a practical standpoint. These include cyber capabilities. NATO should knit partners together in a network system of C4 airstrike targeting, early warning. Credible US security commitments reduce conflict. BRIC 16. US security commitments and deterrence results receive broad support in a study spanning 2 centuries. Alliances lower conflict. Military forces in the theater is key. Studies ratify the expectation it's easier to defend and challenge alliances with nuclear allies. Works structure bias works against it. Rely on latent capabilities in the US homeland is less effective. Foreign deterrence is appealing because defending is cheaper than overturning. Thus the plan. The United States federal government should substantially increase its cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization over the Baltics in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity-enabled exercises and capabilities. Advantage 2 is assurance. Proliferation is fast. Ukraine sent the worst message in history. Einhorn 22. Invasion abandoned norms essential to non-prolif. The war proved the greatest stimulus to prolif in history. Concerns are shared by many experts. States under threat and reconsider nuclear deterrent and security. The perception that Putin's saber rattling succeeded in deterring NATO increased the fears of potential victims that hate to be left without a protector. Absent strengthened US guarantees proliferation is inevitable. Key Team 22. Norms against prolif are breaking down. Governments looking at Ukraine may conclude a nuclear arsenal can help a state impose its will. Countries build weapons when they cannot count on security guarantees. In the wake of invasion, countries seek guarantees. The US need to show there are sources of security and they work. If not, a race for nuclear weapons. NATO cooperation over the Baltics assuages allied fears. Con 18. Russian interests are ambiguous and leave speculation and misinterpretation. NATO cannot be sure. Russia frequently issues nuclear threats toward NATO. Developments create political problems. They pressure NATO to review its nuclear component. Such a debate risks eroding unity. Alliance at odds for its own deterrence can be perceived as weak, making it a target for blackmail and coercion. Preserving unity is key. New gen warfare is challenging. Baltic states are subject to disinfo and hate speech. NATO needs a comprehensive strategy, takes into account allies in the wider region. The alliance should enhance resilience, such as electricity outages, cyber attacks, and destabilization efforts. Prolif causes nuclear war. Connect 15. Spread of nuclear weapons poses nuclear war, terror, further prolif. The more states, the greater probability there will be nuclear war. New states lack second strike. States incentive to use first. States believe as first strike capable of launch preventive strike. Say with one more arsenal, fewer use or lose. Mark the card at use or lose.
Alright, are you good for cross-examination?
Yeah.
So I want to first talk about the solvency of the plan. Your Lucas evidence on the first advantage was from March of 2022 and says that the United States needs to work on defensive measures with Baltics countries. Then in May of 2022, 3 months later rather, the United States included the 3 Baltics countries in their cyber defense system called Cybercom. Why doesn't that solve?
The Cybercom was created during that time, but the Cybercom did not extend cyber defenses to the Baltic region. The Cybercom's current goal is offensive cyber operations, not cyber defense of NATO.
Okay, so your argument is that countries like Lithuania, which are in the Baltics, are literally not part of Cybercom operations. Is that your argument?
No, they're part of Cybercom, but Cybercom does not establish defense for those nations. Russia's
Okay,
cyber
so
attacks
what
are
does
still causing
Cybercom
devastating
do?
harm. Yeah, Cybercom, as I was explaining earlier, is focused on offensive cyber operations, where NATO attacks Russian and Chinese member states. It's not about defense protecting the Baltics from a Russian invasion.
Okay, let's talk about your Lucas et al. Evidence. What are the defensive measures that the plan actually outlines? Is it improving firewalls? Is it solving encryption issues? What does the plan do?
Yeah, so the cybersecurity component of the plan includes all those things. It includes firewalls, it includes encryption that makes Baltic critical infrastructure more resilient from Russian cyber attacks. And it also includes things like quick patches to Baltic.
Okay, I guess how does that deter Russia from cyber attacking institutions? If your whole argument is that Russia eventually wants to invade the Baltics, then why would they stop cyber attacking if you never impose an actual cost on them?
When those cyber defenses are effective, even if Russia continues attempting cyber attacks, it cannot cause harm to the Baltic economy or the Baltic military.
Right, but if if cyber defenses can be as effective as possible, if a cost is not imposed on Russia, then Russia is not losing anything. At worst, it only helps them.
The deterrence effect is that when the plan happens, when the app provides the Baltics with cybersecurity and AI-enabled exercises and capabilities, it causes Russia to see that NATO is willing to defend the Baltics and that they're willing to come to the Baltics.
Okay, what makes them stop doing cyber attacks then? Can I have a line of evidence?
No, our argument is not necessarily that Russia stops cyber attacks, but rather that those cyber attacks become ineffective and that they are deterred from a conventional attack.
Okay, I want to talk about the further scenario you said, which is that cyber attacks then lead to kind of military conflict. Why would Russia invade a NATO country? When is one empirical example of them ever wanting to invade a NATO country?
The reason why there is no empirics of it happening, because if it did happen, we'd all be dead. There would be nuclear war. Our evidence from March, a month ago, says that Russia is moving nukes to Kaliningrad, nuclear submarines to the Baltic Sea region,
right, you just
and troops to the border.
You kind of just answered my question and proved my point. If nuclear war happened, everyone would die. So why would Russia want to engage in nuclear war with the United States and NATO, which is made of 30 countries?
Mutually assured destruction does not currently apply because Russia does not see a credible deterrence posture in the Baltics.
Thank you. All right, I'm setting up the word. Introduce it. The order will be 3 off and then case.
In this debate, the affirmationists presented a plan to protect the Baltic states without considering a few major holes in their policy. First, the actor they have chosen for this plan in NATO is unsustainable, and using them will only lead to more escalation in Europe. Instead, we need an alternate solution, which we will present later on. Moreover, the affirmative has ignored the trade-off that their plan will create in other regions of the world that will lead to more disastrous impacts. Along with this, the affirmative has simply conflated the actual likelihood and severity of the harms they brought up in the Baltic region. Thus, you should be voting negative in this debate. First is the argument that NATO is simply a bad institution to solve for their plan. NATO is an unsustainable paper tiger. U.S. security cooperation with NATO plus brinkmanship, escalation, and miscalculation will undermine European collective defense. But according to Bond Order 2019, NATO is a paper tiger, but so is self-defense budgets and hollow forces. Not credible. Macedonia, Montenegro's army has 2,000 bring tensions with the Russian Baltics. German troops use room 6 to simulate guns. Europe has resources defensive even if Russia advances without U.S. 500 million GDP. Potentially developing more than triple Russia's true nuclear deterrence. Reason for Europeans feel credible military power, they rely on used defense. U.S. committing itself to fight for allies who won't fight for each other. This becoming increasingly clear to friendly and hostile onlookers. The British escalation, miscalculation, nuclear war. Collective defense should be built on credible deterrence. As long as the U.S. commit to defending Europe, Euro lack the will and needs to defend itself. Politically weak American pressure had little effect. American interests fed up with unsustainable affairs. Only to shock the withdrawal spurs Europe to commit into collective defense. America made less safe by NATO. U.S. should withdraw as quickly as possible. European countries want to enact conform with the affirmative, but they don't want to work in NATO because the U.S. constantly encroaches on their authority. The plan will include infighting that diminishes the solvency, according to Frank 2021. Criticism of the EU made Europeans wonder, in light of 5G technologies become an area that creates conflict. 5G sustainable damage has to be done, even if relations improve. The U.S. is diminishing interest in Europe. Europeans pursue other democratic allies. Europeans have become more about European strategic autonomy aimed in the tech realm. Idea of European digital sovereignty built on European tech capabilities led to regulation of American tech. Europeans in opposition to the United States. Ultimately, the affirmative has ignored this key part of their policy. Countries in NATO don't want to work on specific policies within NATO. That is why our counterplan, which is the next alpha, will empower European countries and prevent the United States from controlling them by going through the EU and actually resolving their issues in this way. Now we'll move on to the second alpha, which is the EU counterplan. We propose a counterplan to resolve the issue of NATO being unsustainable. The European Union should substantially increase its cooperation with the Baltics in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity-enabled exercises and capabilities. EU strength prevents global conflict and transnational threats, which leads to extinction. Alpha 19. In a bitter war, EU's unique assets in the economy and multilateral promote norms and public goods, key to push back on nationalism. Military operations speaks not to legislation where EU has better opportunities to develop autonomy. Europe faces an increasingly hostile environment, remains vested in pursuing human rights and the rule of law, which underpin resilience and partner to push back attacks on international order as a priority. Without giving into facile critiques, the geopolitics further regular multilateral obsolete Europe leverage assets in cooperation, climate conflict mediation, open trade are among assets that EU can work towards. Europe needs to think about global sustainability, engaging in common goods. Next off is the disadvantage. Surging diplomacy has tentatively reinforced U.S. alliances with Japan and South Korea, but doubling down on European commitments erodes credibility in Asia and saps diplomatic sources, according to Psalm 22. Diplomacy with South Korea and Japan drive alliances. Biden held talks amid tensions, dialogue causes Washington or preoccupied with Moscow. U.S. diplomacy sends a message. Focus on Russia. Questions whether America can reapportion diplomatic resources in support of South Korea and Japan. Doubts continue. Credibility issue stems from the strategy which seeks to win one war while deterring in another region. Biden's assurances to allies concerned to a certain extent. Japan will develop offensive strikes in response. Nuclear war, World War 19. Japanese strike side Tokyo losing confidence to start a reaction that causes allies to develop capabilities, increasing instability. Environment is tense as a result of Korea's nuclear and island reclamation, armament with and dialogue on territorial disputes. Mistrust escalate into war. Redemption of Japan caused escalation that draws into the United States. Japan, Republic of Korea relations spiral out of control. Trilateral cooperation deter threats. Japan strike with real effort. Vietnam and Philippines lost faith. Japan's credibility and hedging could increase tension, heighten the risk of escalation, also lead to Chinese assertiveness. If the United States actually discredited its reliability, Japan would move forward with conventional strength. Even the discussion of acquiring could worsen security. The United States will compensate a decrease in soft diplomacy with tactical nuclear weapon redeployment to the Korean Peninsula. Spurs regional nuclear arms erasing and war. Dalton 21. Korea plus impact nuclear weapons when they would repair perceived damage extend to deterrent. These tend to be dismissed in Washington. Frustration regarding concentration speak through credibility deficit cause reflect anxiety development force between alliance management and non-proliferation. To rebuild credibility, damage interest in redeployment. Biden and interest policy based requires for countervailing forward deployment tactical nuclear weapons provoke arguments with China and worsen conflict. North Korea responded its own use, increasing the risk of use in limited scenarios. Redeploying staggering negotiations, Korean Japanese dispute, cheaping non-proliferation would be set back. Frustrate U.S. policy in the non-proliferation treaty and use entry arms control. Now onto their case. We'll first start off on their deterrence advantage. 1. The status quo solves. The U.S. routinely cooperates with the Baltic countries to protect networks from cyber attacks. U.S. military generals have said that cyber cooperation is already a top priority for both regions. According to the Baltic Times in May 2022, Lithuania and U.S. wrapped up a joint cyber defense operation aimed at boosting interoperability and increasing resilience of networks to cyber threats. The operation involved U.S. cybercom team and specialists from the National Cybersecurity Center. Cyber is a team sport. U.S. Army Major General Joe Hartman was quoted saying, "The Regional Cyber Defense Center in Lithuania serves as the main platform for Lithuanian American cooperation." Second, Ukraine could not be a worse example for them to use in declaring Russia's posture. They only escalate in response to the U.S.'s actions, according to Mirosmar 22. The United States is responsible for causing Ukraine, America's obsession with making it a Western bulwark. 3. No Baltic War, according to the SIAS 2022. It is highly unlikely that Russia will initiate an invasion of the Baltic, particularly while engaged in Ukraine. At 300 kilometers of their coast, it is very unlikely fighting Ukraine will lead to inadvertent escalation or accident in the Baltic. NATO and Russia would seek to de-escalate quickly. 4. They have zero means or motive, according to SIAS 2022. Russia has shown no intent towards the Baltics in recent years, with significant proportion of its forces inside Ukraine sustaining major casualties. Russia lacks the resources to commit to the Baltics. 5. No nuclear escalation, they don't benefit from it, according to Lanotska 19. Russia does not need to use nuclear weapons to conquer the Baltics. The force ratio is heavily favored, even with NATO's forward presence. Threats to use lack believably. Not only would it deepen Russia's isolating status, it would precipitate to think that Russia would prefer to avoid involvement by the United States. Why would it risk its destruction for the sake of 3 Baltic countries? 6. No Russia war. Ukraine has wrecked them. Bergman 522. There is a gap between Russia's objectives and its capacity. Europe devastating Russia's economy. Force suffered losses. How will Russia be able to rebuild its military when it cannot buy semiconductors, work around that, cause depleting coffers, export control, and starving Russia of the technology. Putin is nuclear cyber rattling. This is loose talk. Russia's lost one of its most important soft power boost greater. Attacks on critical infrastructure risk for the coming of vulnerable Russia with its hands full, and Ukraine will likely be nervous about provoking an escalatory spiral. The second advantage about assurance. 1. Prolif doesn't cause war. Cohen 17. Cluster means full to specify how and when proliferation precipitates conflict threshold. A corruption of the program strike cannot lead to escalation. Subject to be assured to reduce the danger of survivability. Accidental detonations suffer from a mated vertical bias. The actions pose less risk escalation. Leaders engage in conventional aggression by experience. Moderate conflict dangers are weaker than assumed. Second, reassurance is impossible. Commitments of the Baltics are inherently non-credible. Shifting in 17. Credibly, NATO has been unclear all the way to cost of nuclear exchange. Policymakers face a problem in making allies believe they would take the plunge. It is difficult to convince actors the United States will soon send for others. The result is going to escalate the honors commitment. It must engage in nuclear exchange. However, no reassurance promises train Toledo for talent. The stakes are too low. And 3. There is no spread and no impact. China 20. Hold on. Potential for stabilizing despite rates return contribute to long peace because proliferation is rare and robust measures disruptive and the net effect is small. It spreads its powers to provide a warning, yet never all remain below the weapons efforts span many years. 29 of 39 embarked have not required owing to technology institutional management challenge nations failed. Several undertaken the nuclear reversal and abandoning activities. At the end of the day, the affirmative has used the wrong actor to actually solve their policy, which would only lead to worst escalation in Europe, including the Baltic states. Instead, they counterplan solved by using the European Union, as well as that they have ignored the fact that their plan would trade off with diplomatic resources in South Korea and Japan, which is uniquely more important, and the impact of this would be even worse than what they have brought up, because all of our defense on case state that this isn't a real risk.
Ready?
Yep.
Foreign dollar evidence is written in 2019. Since then, America has cooperated with NATO to provide millions of dollars of arms to Ukraine, stuff things that create the cybercom. Why haven't these actions with NATO triggered escalation with Russia?
Sure, so the foreign dollar evidence gives a few theories. The first is that all of the budget commitments for NATO countries, because other European countries don't even meet these budget requirements, the United States is left to
That doesn't answer my
cover.
question. Why hasn't there been escalation with Russia from NATO cooperation?
Again, like the plan would lead to this, would use NATO in the sense that the United States would be forced to lead the entire cybersecurity plan under your affirmative, which will only lead to a world in which European countries themselves do not commit to the resources that are necessary for your plan,
Your evidence-
leading for the United States.
Your evidence is about NATO free riding. Generally, this was written prior to the Ukraine conflict. Since the Ukraine conflict, NATO allies have come out in droves to provide billions of dollars. They've been making pledges to add more troops and defenses in the region.
I'm not sure if
Why do
that's,
you think this
I'm
evidence
not
still
sure
applies
if
now?
that's true. Like, I can point to one example of Germany. They've empirically refused to follow NATO's command in sending like tanks or other weapons to
No,
Ukraine.
they literally just approved the Abrams tanks.
What you have to realize, I'm assuming this is open house, but what you have to realize is that everything that European countries are doing is not through NATO. They're individually giving aid to Ukraine.
That is incorrect.
Ukraine is not an issue that is like controversial. Everyone in
incorrect.
Europe wants
The
Ukraine to win.
EU
It doesn't mean NATO is a good alliance.
The EU kind of plan, we've read plenty of evidence that says that the only deterrent signal that Russia trusts is one from America, because the EU does not have its own nuclear arsenal. How does the EU acting alone create a deterrence effect on Russia and prevent an invasion?
Yeah, so the Gulf War 19 evidence gives a lot of reasons why this is true, why this is key. The EU has a lot of unique assets because of their economy, their
Yeah, it says that it can promote norms and public goods to push back against nationalism. That's about fighting against domestic nationalism. How do you think that's a reason that they can deter Russia?
Well, multilateral norms includes like preventing other countries from escalating. That would,
So you think that because they're able to create some norms, Russia won't invade the Baltics? They've literally demonstrated that they're willing to violate norms and invade Ukraine.
I mean, we've also read other pieces of evidence about why Russia, in any case, wouldn't invade the Baltics. They simply don't have the resources or ability to do this. The European Union also pushing norms will only decrease the risk of this happening.
The DivCap dissat, it says, quote, deterrence based on regional alliances will not wane even if a Russia-Ukraine standoff gobbles up America's attention. So what this card is saying, it was written when the Ukraine conflict was starting, it's saying that even if there's a large war in Europe, which should happen in the Ukraine conflict, it would not be able to sap diplomatic capital. Why do you think this is a link to that?
Sure. In the blog, we'll kind of expand on this. We'll explain how Ukraine is kind of a brink. Your plan is completely separate from Ukraine. It includes the Baltics, which would only lead to more trade-off than what's happening now.
The order is deterrence, assurance, the EU counterplan, NATO bad, the disadvantage. Is anyone not ready?
So you said deterrence, assurance, and what else?
The EU counterplan, NATO bad, the disadvantage. Are you all good?
Let me know.
Okay.
One second. All right, I'm good.
They say the status quo solves, but we have presented evidence from 2023 that the Baltics invasion is imminent. Putin has moved nuclear submarines to the region, he has placed ICBMs in Kaliningrad, and he has moved troops to the border, which means that he will attack the Baltics as a diversionary tactic to distract from his failures in Ukraine. Their evidence is outdated, it's from 2022. Only we presented evidence from the last month that says that an invasion is coming now. They say that NATO caused Ukraine, but Crosscheck smoked them on this issue. NATO expansion did not cause Ukraine. When we expanded to the Baltics, Putin did not invade any country. It was only when we did not assist Ukraine that Putin invaded them, which suggests that it is the lack of deterrence, not the guarantee of deterrence, that deters Putin. Furthermore, this is West blaming the conflict because it is very irrational and illogical to say that this imperialist, horrible autocratic dictator was justified because of NATO expansion when he obviously was not. They say, group the next two arguments, they're outdated. Only we have evidence from 2023 that says that an invasion is imminent. They say that there's no chance of nuclear war, but this evidence goes affirmative because it says that an invasion is possible since Putin thinks that the Baltics are not defendable in the status quo. But Ukraine proves that there is a risk of nuclear war because Putin has even said that he may risk nuclear war over the Ukraine conflict. So there's no question over him risking the same for the Baltics. They say that Russia is defeated now, but this evidence is again outdated. We have evidence from 2023 that Russia has drafted new troops, that Russia is rebuilding their arsenals and missiles and their weaponry, which means that they will be able to launch a new invasion. The assurance advantage. Yes, proliferation impact, their evidence goes affirmative. It says, quote, that conventionally these countries have gotten more aggressive after they acquired nuclear weapons, which means that these countries will pursue more aggressive actions. They will take more risky measures because they feel like they're defended by the bomb, which makes miscalculation, which makes escalation likely. They say that assurances are impossible, but they've conceded specific when you see evidence that explains how US leadership, by providing the Baltics with extremely high-tech and extremely capable technologies, is able to assure the Baltics and is able to get these countries to no longer pursue the bomb. They say that there's no spread and no proliferation, but again, this is false because it doesn't assume the Ukraine conflict, which has created unique fear among our allies, which makes proliferation likely. The EU counterplan. One, it cannot solve the affirmative because of capabilities. The EU can't deploy C4ISR or interoperability. It will take decades or more. Manager 21, employment of modern weapons systems is challenging. Europeans would need large amounts of C4ISR sensor systems, naval platforms which have long development times. Countries lack specialized personnel. Recruiting personnel will be a major challenge. A recent study has shown highly skilled and trained personnel are more difficult to recruit and retrain. Retrain. 2, permutation to both. 3, cohesion. The United States is key to cohesion. Absent NATO, the EU gets divided. Manager 21, military planning requires a clear chain of command. The US facilitated institutionalized cooperation. A US-led NATO has been a shaper, helping overcome coordination and collective action problems. US disengagement would hinder strategies, training, interoperability. The EU has struggled mightily to create even the most minimal C2 structures. 4, international fiat is a voting issue. It justifies object fiat and is not real world. They should not be allowed to fiat. All 20-something EU countries should act at the same exact time. 5, condo is a voter. A, fairness deters proliferation of overpowered counterplans. B, quality of debates discourages offense, obstructs testing, and causes late-breaking rounds. 7, signaling. The United States primarily uses NATO for Baltic defense. That's herbalist. The evidence can't be clearer. Predictable and durable security cooperation is key, which means that a new agent in charge of Baltic's defense would fail. That's the Lucas evidence. And drastically changing the status quo collapses deterrence. That's the Kuhn and Klein evidence. 9, permutation to the account plan. 10, it leads to no benefit. It cannot resolve European leadership through one instance of cooperation, and it definitely cannot resolve diplomatic capital. 12, no EU leadership impact. Pelagio. 20, EU falters, lack of political will, misallocated resources, fail to build up capacity, lacks self-assurance, serve as a credible example. US will be indispensable. It is irreplaceable. Cross-apply all of the EU bad arguments to NATO bad because the only reason why they have for NATO bad is that the EU is good, which means that all of our EU bad stuff applies. NATO bad. 1, no link. The plan improves security guarantees, not political cohesion. They have not presented evidence that NATO is collapsing in the status quo. 2, proliferation is fast and triggers miscalculation, making their impacts inevitable. 3, sustainable. Prophecies have been disproven. Ukraine has generated a lot of unity among NATO. 22. NATO's unity has never been stronger. The consensus on Ukraine is indisputable. Since last spring, there has been discussions about a rift over fabricated reasons, but this rupture, long prophesied by the Kremlin, has never happened. 4, a divided NATO causes war between NATO countries. Shapiro 19. NATO is preventing intra-European conflict. The NATO umbrella and US domination keep states from turning to the military to settle disputes. A divided Europe with the US on the sidelines can lead to catastrophic consequences. 5, they say EU autonomy, overstretched turn autonomy undermines progressive security. Talas 119, pursuing hard power would risk undermining its capacity to provide progressive kinds of security. Europeans should seek integrated, not autonomous partnership. The diplomatic capital is that. 1, The proliferation advantage straight turns this disadvantage. Credibility theory proves that when we assure the Baltic states, when we prove that we will defend our allies, Japan and South Korea will also be assured by our overtures to our NATO allies. 2, there are multiple thumpers to this disadvantage. Expansion and arms sales to Ukraine, focus on Eastern Europe, and other examples of NATO cooperation disprove the idea that focusing on NATO trades off with Asia. 3, leading and assisting NATO enhances diplomatic capital, which link turns a disadvantage. McNamara 15. Diplomatic capital, a form of currency which can be gathered through competence, reputation, and authority. The owner of the mission, the United States, securing a direct objective in NATO as the optimum opportunity to enhance diplomatic capital and a greater platform to influence NATO policy. 5, collaboration spills over globally. That's now 18. Collaboration is easier when residents are connected through social networks. Investments in DipCap and institutions constrained in the global community to act for the common good. 6, their evidence goes affirmative. There's no trade-off, and retrenchment occurs in the status quo because things like relations with China, Afghanistan are all causes. We read yellow. Diplomacy will not wane even if Russia gobbles up America's attention. Although Washington is heavily consumed with Ukraine, its military must not be underestimated. Doubts continue as Washington appears inclined to avoid entanglements and focus on domestic challenges, and its rivalry with Beijing as seen in Afghanistan. 6, the app solves a credible nuclear umbrella in rank 14. Doubts over the U.S. commitment led Britain and France to develop nuclear capabilities. In other instances, the umbrella appears to be much more credible. Japan, Taiwan, and SoCo do not pursue because reliance nuclear commitments are credible when they include reliability-enhancing provisions such as alliance obligations and military institutionalization. Institutionalized alliances are strongly associated with lower defense spending and a lower likelihood a client state will pursue its own nuclear weapons. 7, there's no chance of a China war because China is inherently less prone to war as proven by their approved by the no first use policy, which means that a China war is unlikely. Go back to NATO back. Declining U.S. leadership in NATO increases populism, right-20, retrenchment with high nationalism and xenophobia. Withdrawal would send a message every country must fend for itself. It would empower far-right groups while undermining centrist leaders who told their populations they could rely on the U.S. and NATO. Rising populism causes nuclear war. Vonderheide in 17. World War II nationalist movements converged. Communication that realigned global concern allies movements could trigger decline in productivity. NATO preserves freedom of the world. Problems rise, appealing to nationalists. Feelings is playing with fire. With WMD, danger is greater than ever of nuclear war.
Good?
Yeah.
Alright, let's start off on case. You said that Russia is increasing their capabilities in the Baltic region right now. That makes invasion inevitable. How long does it take for Russia to completely rebuild or revamp their military power?
We think it'll be pretty fast. Our evidence was from March. It says that Russia has already placed ICBMs, nukes in the region, and that they are retraining new troops, so an offensive is imminent.
Alright, what's the time frame?
Well, we can't tell you the exact date when they will invade, but we have presented evidence from experts that say that Putin is seriously considering a Baltic invasion, and will do so in the short term.
Alright, if Putin already has these nukes and ICBMs within Russia right now, how would their plan which only addresses cybersecurity threats resolve already existing threats in the region right now?
Our argument is that these deployments of tactical nuclear weapons are examples that show that Putin is building up the force posture. But if NATO is able to send an extremely strong signal, where all of a sudden we provide Baltics with the most advanced technologies that Baltics have ever seen, then Russia will never feel like they'll be able to invade the Baltics.
Russia has the weapons in place. How would increasing their cybersecurity defenses just allow them to remove these weapons?
We have conceded specific 1EC evidence that explains how an invasion would occur. First, Putin would use cyber attacks against critical infrastructure, government systems, to access the data.
Assurance advantage. You say that Ukraine is nuclear. Why has Poland never escalated in the past? What about Ukraine?
Well, Poland was very close to escalating in the past. The Cold War and the numerous close accidents where one person stopped the country from stopped the world from nuclear Armageddon proves that proliferation does cause conflict, does cause tensions. Our evidence explains how after China, the United States, and Russia acquired nuclear bombs, they became much more aggressive. They invaded a bunch of other countries. So obviously, we should not allow more countries to get even more nuclear weapons to increase the risk of conflict.
I'm not sure if that answered it, but okay, we'll go on to the disadvantage. You claim that there's other bunkers. I guess what uniquely about these bunkers were related to Europe and expanding European diplomatic resources.
The United States has dedicated all of its resources to Ukraine.
To Ukraine, I
Ukraine
understand that.
is
I'm
in
talking
Europe.
other than
That is a focus on
external
Europe.
to Ukraine. Is there anything external?
External to Ukraine, your example of the cyber command thing that you brought up in what you see cross-sex is an example that shows that there is cooperation over the Baltics.
Does any piece of your evidence about your intern and NATO expanding diplomatic capital apply in the region of South Korea or Japan?
Our evidence is hyper-specific on the ability for diplomatic capital to create winners and to allow the United States to have even more reputation, to have even more competence and authority.
Of South Korea and Japan specifically.
The evidence is not specific to Asia, but the song evidence that we've highlighted of your evidence does say that the United States will be able to cooperate with Asia.
Okay, so we have 8 minutes of prep starting now. Stop prep, we use 3 minutes and 59 seconds. the order is going to be case, and then the div cap disadvantage. Right. Is anyone not ready? Throughout this debate, the affirmative has not properly responded to the arguments that we have already solved the cybersecurity issues that are plaguing our Baltics allies, and additionally, that Russia will not escalate into the Baltics, given that if they do, they would face a decisive response by all 30 NATO militaries. Realize that every single time in their next speech they say that Ukraine proved that Russia is aggressive, realize that that is not the case, because all of our evidence points to the fact that Ukraine is not a NATO ally, but rather the Baltics countries are, which means that Russia realizes that they can invade Ukraine, because all 30 NATO countries, according to Article 5, will obviously not commit their militaries to responding. But when Russia invades the Baltic countries, they know that all 30 NATO militaries will respond to them, which is exactly why from the start of the debate I've been asking them for one specific line that is predictive, that says that Russia will invade the Baltics right now. And all of their evidence just indicates that it is, quote, a possibility, which obviously is not the threshold. The affirmative has just not properly responded to the first argument that my partner made in the last speech. The affirmative plan has already been solved. Our Baltics time evidence, which is the newest piece of evidence in this round, from May of last year, said that Lithuania was included in US cybercom operations, and the Regional Cyber Defense Center was established to, quote, serve as the main platform for Lithuanian-American cooperation. Now, the affirmative made a very smart argument that this is about offensive measures and cross-examination, and not defensive. But this is simply not true. This is why our evidence says that cybercom provides, quote, joint cyber defensive operations aimed at boosting interoperability and increasing the resilience of critical networks to cyber threats. The affirmative advocates for interoperability, which is exactly what this plan 2 months later than their evidence already did. They claim that to increase networks through encryption and firewalls. Again, this policy already enacted those measures. That was already done, which means all of the plan is solved. Just a month ago, the US conducted a comprehensive cybersecurity exercise with 3 Baltics countries, according to Hosler in 2023. The military experts from the US, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania participated in the Baltic Cyberspace and Intelligence Board. The roadmaps developed will improve regional defense, and said General Chad Raduc, Cyber Director and the US Chair for the board. Second is that the largest question in this debate is that first cross-examination proves exactly what our evidence says, that Russia will not invade Baltics even if the plan is something new. For the 2 circuit judges in this round, you better not pull the trigger on deterrence low now. In actual circuit debate, policy teams just get away with saying deterrence is lacking. None of their evidence makes a predictive claim that actually indicates that Russia will invade the Baltics right now. It's not just a question of whether NATO defenses are sufficient. It's a question of whether or not Russia would actually react on those defenses by invoking nuclear war with a NATO country. They will, in their next speech, say that even if Russia in general doesn't want the world to die, in times of conflict, miscalculation and confusion will lead to the use of nuclear weapons. Wrong. That's why our Lansky 19 evidence, the fact that they conceded that, is huge, because it says that force ratios heavily favor NATO because the Baltics are a part of NATO, and Article 5 means that an attack on one nation would lead to all 30 NATO countries responding. Russia knows this, which is why for the past 14 months, despite the Baltics countries being nearly only 300 miles away from Ukraine, they have not even touched the Baltic border once, because they know that NATO will respond heavily. They say that in their last speech, their evidence is from last year. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't assume structural issues like our evidence indicates, where Russia literally does not have the capabilities to invade the Baltics, even if they invested massive amounts of resources. That's why their evidence from Sumner's, which is from March of this year, says only that further Russian aggression seems increasingly possible. That does not make a predictive claim that you should invest massive amounts of millions of resources in something that is not probable. Ukraine is not proof of nuclear war. Large framing issues that Ukraine is not a part of NATO, which answers their argument. The 2 pieces of SIAS evidence state that despite them invading Ukraine, quote, Russia has shown little to no aggressive intent or presented any kind of genuine military threat towards the Baltics in recent years, and that, quote, Russia lacks the resources to commit an invasion-scale force to the Baltics. They said in the last speech that Russia has put missiles near the Baltics. That doesn't matter, because all of our evidence indicates that the things that Putin says that he will invade the Baltics and other missile activities are just to ensure that NATO does not encroach into Ukraine much further, but does not prove that Russia will actually force a war upon 30 NATO countries, which means that the plan is solving an issue that doesn't exist. So now on the disadvantage. The US is improving diplomacy with SOCO and Japan now, but the plan doubles on European commitments, which wrecks US credit in Asia. That prompts Japanese offensive strikes, which draws in US tactical nuclear weapons in Korean Peninsula, that cuts China and NOCO arms racing, that goes to nuclear. That was the 1C Dalton evidence. It outweighs. One is time frame. Ukraine provides a brake for preventing European doubling down. Asia is paying attention, so the plan causes US credibility collapse. Baltic War 6 years to happen because Russia is not, quote, invading any second. As for the explanation, there's been over 14 months since the war in Ukraine. They haven't made a single step. The second is probability. Intervening actors solve their scenarios, but not all, since Japan is set on offense without US support. They just started their military just a couple of years ago. Second is scope, or third is scope. Japan offensive strike destabilized the entire Asia, which causes multiple conflict hotspots, Chinese adventurism, Philippines, and Vietnam. That's one of the one where the disadvantage actually means that the same impact the affirmative talks about only gets worse. One, in a world where the US and allies are drawn into a South Asian escalating conflict, it is the perfect opportunity for Russia to invade the Baltics. Our A28E won't be effective because NATO would inevitably use military funding and resources on the conflict with China and Japan, and the perception of that deterrence would be gone in Europe. It would be gone in Europe. Their first argument was a link turn. I'll do the link debate here. One, extend the strong evidence. The diplomatic capital high now. Recommitment to Europe convinces Asian countries about lack of US commitment in the region, which discontinues diplomacy. Second is the plan stops funding directly from the US. Taliaferro, 18 security cooperation cannot be undertaken with a title and authorized for the duty taxpayer dollars for security cooperation for Department of Defense state appropriations. The link turn, the straight turn evidence is nonsensical, and zero card supports it. Our evidence says that it's about Asian allies feeling supported by the US. They view their priorities separate from Europe, which means that obviously even if the plan shores up NATO, they don't care about European commitments. They rather care about Asia, which was the strong evidence. They say that Ukraine thumbs. I'll do the thumpers debate here. To the dissent assumes all major thumpers. Biden's summer visit marked a diplomatic renaissance in Asia, but the effect can only last if the US doesn't pivot back to Europe. According to Am in 2022, the US is a major player in the Pacific. There's been concerns about other crises taking over time, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Ukraine. This is Biden's opportunity to say, hey, we are involved in timely, considering members are robots about the US paying too much attention to Europe and the abilities in Asia. They're reassured about US affirming their commitment. Has the US finally proved we're working apart? This will always be our long-term process. Allies always want reassurances and to run the president is not a single summit. We're going to continue to gain effort. 3, new Biden national security strategy reassures Asian allies that the US will prioritize commitments to the region. Despite Ukraine means all numbers are priced in and only the plan trades off more. 1070 for Asia continues with and SSR released last week. Washington continued commitment to the war in Ukraine will be welcome to the Asian allies. New strategy will increase room for engagement between Asia and the US. Biden administration will devote significant time to engaging the contested zones of the Pacific. Understanding countries are in the region. New strategy Asia worries about the superpower competition for those on the receiving end of Chinese power. India, Japan, and SSS offer strong reassurance that the US will remain committed despite a war in Europe and a destruction in the Middle East, and attempt to address all challenges will succeed in resolving none, which proves that Ukraine is a brink for our argument. They say that other examples of NATO cooperation, no evidence to back this up. They say that winners win. No, the plan does not improve diplomatic capital. Large framing issues that this piece of evidence is from 2015, which obviously doesn't assume that the first the fine line we have right now in international flow, but that was the uniqueness of it. Second, this card is about the US securing Afghanistan. It says nothing about Asian countries will enjoy policy that doesn't support them in the status quo, which means the link-turn evidence doesn't apply. They see collaboration spills over globally. This card is not about NATO. It's about social cooperation between cultures, which is obviously not NATO implementing security cooperation. They say that there is no trade-off. If this is the case, then you can just, or rather they say that the affirmative solves a credible nuclear umbrella. If this is the case, then you can just go negative on presumption, because the affirmative nuclear umbrella should prevent a nuclear escalation right now. But our whole argument is that Japan will first strike in the status quo because they are building up their military, and the only way that they determine whether their military is significant is through US support.
Let me get water.
Yeah, we're good.
My first question concerns the solvency component of the affirmative. You cited 2 examples of exercises that NATO has done with Baltic states. How is this sufficient to solve cybersecurity?
So, one card is about examples that proves an overall trend that the United States is working with Baltic countries right now. I don't think we've just provided examples. The first card we read in the 1EC, or rather the 1NC, says that the United States has included Baltic countries in cybercom operations in May of 2020.
Yeah, in one operation. It was one hunt team for an
No,
operation.
it was not. It says that...
And it was one instance of cooperation. Your evidence also goes on to say that this was the first ever joint project with US Cybercom.
Yeah, we agree.
So, how does this evidence explain why a whole of government response towards cyber attacks is occurring, that we are attacking all critical infrastructures, networks within the Baltics.
You're
Where
talking
is this
about
evidence?
you're talking about the top of that piece of evidence, which indicates that exercises included U.S. cybercom. You should look at the bottom piece of evidence, which indicates that, for example, the United States has joint operations with the Lithuanian Centers of Excellence. I forgot the exact name of the center, but it indicates that the United States.
There was one exercise of a foreign.
No, you're looking at the top of the. Like, you're literally reading the top of the card. The bottom of the card indicates that the main part of cooperation, I'm pretty sure, is the exact wording is between the United States and Lithuania. As an example.
Yeah, but it does not say that we are protecting their networks or that we are protecting.
No, it actually does. Our evidence says, quote, it solves issues of interoperability, which is exactly what the plan does. Like,
it's about one exercise.
No,
where does this evidence talk about artificial intelligence?
I mean, like, we would argue that that would probably be part of cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity is part of artificial.
No, like artificial intelligence, like for example, identifying where a cyber attack comes from, that process of cyber attribution, is a process that uses artificial intelligence.
Okay, so identifying cyber attacks, is that the AI component that you talks about?
I guess it's part of it, yeah. And the whole process of cybersecurity that NATO uses right now includes artificial intelligence. Like, it's not just like manual people sitting there and identifying where an attack comes from.
Is there any other AI program that the United States is conducting before?
We think that they've done it for interoperability.
Which evidence has that?
The first piece of evidence.
Artificial intelligence?
Yeah, because we think that that is included in cybersecurity.
Okay, that is obviously not the case. The diplomatic capital disadvantage. Your answers to the thumpers are evidence from the start of the Ukraine war. They do not assume billions of dollars of increases in aid to Ukraine. How does this answer the thumpers?
It's definitely not from the start of the Ukraine war. The Mohan evidence is from October 17th of 2022, which is halfway into the war in Ukraine. And the Mohan evidence is probably the best piece of evidence on this question. It indicates that Asian allies were at first a little bit worried, but then Biden created a commission and kind of worked with them and said, hey, we are reassuring our allies, we are reassuring our alliance with you. You have to understand that this is the war in Ukraine and this is something different than any other policy. And Asia said, yes, we understand. Now that's why Ukraine is the breakup. We're going to take a prep break.
Order of the speech will be the diplomatic capital disadvantage, the main council plan, and case. Did this add? EU, capital, and then case.
The disadvantage, there's no trade-off, there's no problem. The cap has been fine, the plan can only drain action. One, foreign policy evaluation issue, breaking down less than focus on other issues, creating conflicts as countries watch more over issues. They stretch research with other currencies, finance, creating part of the US focus is separate. The cap is 0 sum, 10. If they say China no first use policy, we don't need to win the China violates no first rule because in reality our evidence indicates that the plan would first lead to Japan feeling pressure because they feel they have to start developing a military and abandonment of the US support and rise means only for them to respond to development offense and first capabilities and use its capabilities. The EU counter plan. I'll answer the theory at the top. They say HOSPL is good. It's good for real world case. Test the agent of the affirmative, and it's international topic. NATO and healing involves more than 2 countries. Mutual are predictable, and it's key for ground. They get tons of it by turning over the sides to the lines. So obviously, strike they say conduct. We get one counterplan. First speed next flux innovation, which info processing and no offense. I will serve the argument on the key. The EU counterplan. Who can see that NATO is sustainable right now, which shakes up the populism term, but we still have a solve these deficits. The act that the EU solves better than NATO and is a better deterrent. The counterplan solves the FNS that EU do the entirety of the plan, except for that the involvement of NATO. Independently revalidate security collaboration within the EU, which mobilizes in the region. That's good to multiply and global risk. Is external. That's when it's developed for the net benefit outweighs one. Probability intervening action strength of scenarios within hours because the EU undergoes European innovation, which is key against emerging threats. And 2 scope. The EU solves all threats, sustainability, conflict, trade, and human rights rule of law. That's developed for its turns case. The Baltics are decimated in a world where the EU has no capabilities in place because the Baltics are part of the EU. They say currently the one links to the net benefit doing both still saps use economic resources from Asia, which leads to escalation. That's why only the EU acting alone can avoid this. And 2, it can't solve the internal US and European interests are mutually exclusive, including the US trees off US autonomy. They say currently can't find one sovereign voter for fairness, education, defense, one air conduct. We can kind of use US safety action. US legal succeed. The use of these usually limits to United States. This helps you deficit the EU doesn't have C4I capability. The CPS uses because it spurs innovation for the EU to implement these capabilities. Specifically, the counterplan solves the entirety case, rebalances lacking EU leadership, and solves Martin's first innovation. Search for Mitty. The base of the security center of the EU like technologies that are part of the EU Commission, especially translating science-based competitive energy initiative, technology that are collaboration between science and engineering, the explorer of security, and civil the application of international security, the goal of your leadership will in this future technology areas to the base of your competitiveness, use place attack on major reach by technology like cyber and AI. The one I see Lucas evidence of generically about capabilities, the only US keyword is blatantly mishighlighted, it's giving a generic security assistance to the Baltic security initiative, which first of all already exists, and it says that it requires reform to be multi-year and predictable funding and center on non-emerging tech areas, which means there's no reason why the US should keep this. Only talks about predictable, durable funding, which the EU can provide as well, because there's really no deficit that the EU doesn't have funding. They say overcharge, there's no impact and concedes that the court concedes that EU should pursue integration of bandwagon insurance. It's descriptive of the status quo. Same with the British insurance. The cohesion insurance doesn't apply because about the US not being involved by NATO, but it doesn't apply to the counterplan because the counterplan only works through the EU, and the counterplan creates a stronger NATO. So we turn this FOE 21. Stronger EU equals stronger NATO. EU will be very powerful NATO. NATO and the EU work together to strengthen their security capabilities to benefit both organizations. Expanding, strengthening, deepening EU NATO cooperation is the way to go. Impact. The benefit framing issues, the only defense that requires to generate part of the EU leadership is low now, but there is the entire point of the counterplan. That is the entire point of the counterplan, and this card flows after generating more uniqueness for the counterplan. The counterplan is key to revitalizing this lagging EU leadership that address priority gets specifically. EU should choose the economy results, multilateral results, economy, climate, and technology. US foreign policy swings to undermine all prior to UN. EU should pursue greater autonomy, extent to economy, trade, climate, energy, digital technology, regulation, autonomy, reducing vulnerability to the EU member states. Each measure can impede strengthen the EU best way to enable states to act. EU sentiment to break defense and more important Chinese seeking all down coordinated strong policy dominance, US foreign policy swings, EU undermined by the United States and China dysfunctional multilateral order reflects on authoritarian capitalism. Okay, so go to deterrence. They say that the invasion is imminent because Russia's adding ICBMs and nukes to Ukraine right now, but they couldn't give a time frame. They conceded that Russia's weak right now. They say that they're rebuilding, but give no time frame about when Russia could actually rebuild in time to completely invade 3 separate countries when they're already losing the war in Ukraine. They have to invade 3 other countries. There's no guarantee that this could actually occur, and they haven't given a specific time frame, but you know right now the EU leadership is imminent because they're lagging right now, and also the diplomatic capital is imminent. Its time frame occurs right now because there's a bright line right now because we need to ensure that our diplomatic resources aren't taken away by the affirmative plan. The assurance disadvantage, again, there's no appearance of when pro-left has ever led to more escalation. They say the Cold War, that's not true because it didn't lead to escalation. There's no reason why Ukraine is uniquely key. Sure, made of heightened risk, but the fact that Ukraine is literally winning the war and the United States is helping Ukraine right now proves that there's no actual risk of escalation, nuclear war or pro-left leading to escalation. There's no reason why Ukraine is key, meaning that both advantages are very highly unlikely by the way the counterplan solves.
deterrence, assurance, the EU counterplan, DIVCAP. You cannot vote for a team that does not know the difference between cybersecurity and AI. The status quo is not solved because they've forgotten about the complete other half of the plan. The Lucas evidence indicates that integrating AI into Baltics exercises and Baltics anti-access area denial systems is necessary to maintain strong deterrence of the Russian posture. But their evidence is also incorrect. It's specific to US-Lithuania cooperation, which is only one of the 3 Baltic nations. And the code about cooperation with all 3 Baltic nations is about one exercise, not about the continued support necessary for deterrence. Yes, Baltic war goes nuclear. It's not that Russia randomly nukes the Baltic states or there's random miscalculation, but rather that Russia strategically deploys tactical nuclear weapons. Our evidence has analyzed Russian military doctrines and says that in their policies, they have explicit doctrines to use tactical nuclear weapons in order to hold on to land and to prevent defeat. The science cards are outdated. Recent evidence says that nuclear deployments to the region are a clear sign of aggression that their evidence from 2022 does not assume. Yes, clear time frame evidence indicates that the recent shifts in Russian posture indicates that a war is imminent now, their assurance advantage. This advantage was largely conceded because they only had impact defense, no internal leak defense, which internally turns the DIVCAP this side. The link alone turns this side because they've conceded that the plan is able to reassure allies abroad because of credibility theory, where if we assure our allies in one region, our allies in other countries can see that we are willing to defend our allies. They say proliferation does not escalate, but the fact that there has not been escalation in the past does not mean there won't be escalation from proliferation now. Our scenario is not about a few countries getting the bomb, but rather wildfire proliferation created by pressures created by Ukraine, where countries are now scared about American security guarantees, and it causes nuclear war because of use it or lose it pressures, miscalculation, which makes nuclear war inevitable, the EU counterplan. Except to AC1, the EU has no capability at all whatsoever. Saying innovation is unresponsive because that's too slow because Russia is going to invade the Baltics now. That's major. Additionally, no one in our evidence is about military applications of the EU, but rather EU innovating in civilian applications of AI and cybersecurity, which obviously is unresponsive to the plan. Extend to AC2, do both. If they're right that the EU can shoulder the burden, then the permutation to both means that the app is not linked to the DIVCAP this side because the EU would take the burden, which would not drain resources. Extend to AC3, the cohesion this side, which was dropped. No new 2 in our answers because tech over truth. They've dropped that Europe inherently has fights between the nations, all countries have different viewpoints on Russia, how they should act, and that the United States has historically been the only actor that has been able to get everyone on board. The military evidence indicates that absent the United States, the EU will pick fights between themselves and it will make cohesion inevitable, which means that they can all solve and create a strong deterrence posture against Russia. They dropped to AC10 that the counterplan leads to net benefit. A one-time action of the European Union helping the Baltics does not magically increase the EU's ability to innovate or to create leadership more broadly. Things like authoritarian Poland and Hungary, as well as rising populism in France and Germany, means that a multilateral EU is impossible. The DIVCAP design. At the top, the Baltic War is faster and outweighs on scope because Russia is a larger threat than China. Russia has already demonstrated that they're an aggressive actor, while China has shown that they're defensive, doing things like the NFU and agreeing to de-escalate after the spy balloon accident. There's no turns case argument because the aid given to the Baltics would have already been given to the Baltics, so it cannot be taken away. The assurance advantage is a massive straight turn to the dispatch, so conceding the entirety of the advantage except for the impact means that we win this debate. We control uniqueness. East Asian allies already fear US commitments now, and they want to proliferate due to the perceived lack of defense of America's European allies. This is Russia's invasion. That's Ironwood. Credibility theory turns to disadvantage. Experts citing 2 centuries of data sets and a long history of America's ability to prevent allies from proliferating proves that credibility theory is true. That's Brooks. Asian allies want to see that the United States is willing to defend hard to defend allies like the Baltics because it's a sign that they are willing to defend Japan and South Korea as well. This is proven by their strong evidence. They dropped a reality which says that Asian allies have called for more aid to Ukraine, not less, because they want to see that America is willing to defend hard to defend allies. The funding leak is wrong. Billions of dollars of aid into Ukraine prove that it does not hamstring the US's ability to cooperate with Asian allies. And the evidence cannot assume Ukraine because their news evidence is from October, which does not assume half a year of continued aid. They dropped to EC6, the AFSOF's nuclear umbrella, which ends this debate, because the narrowing evidence indicates that the plan is able to guarantee security guarantees more broadly by creating this signal of American well-being to our allies, which means that even allies in Asia like South Korea and Japan will have no incentive to proliferate or to ask for tactical nuclear weapons post the plan.
All right, we have 340. The order of the speech will be the dip tap disadvantage, then case, and then the counterpart. Is anyone not ready? You are voting negative because there is such a low risk of the affirmative's Russia escalation impact causing war, which means even a moderate to low risk of the disadvantage just means that we outweigh all of their impacts. Japanese offensive strikes go existential. They draw in U.S. technical nuclear weapons in the Korean Peninsula, which sparks an arms race that goes nuclear by leading to nuclear escalation. That was the One-Dalton evidence that has been conceded throughout this entire debate. The plan collapses U.S. commitments to SOCO and Japan by committing so many time and resources and political energy to securing the Baltics, which wrecks the U.S. credibility in Asia and that causes escalation. A large framing issue is that this entire debate will come down to whether or not the affirmative link terms are disadvantaged, which doesn't make a lot of sense. First, we have read hyper-specific evidence about Japan. All of their link term explanation is about countries such as China and saying that in a world is about countries such as China and saying that a world where NATO is propped up, that China will not go existential. But they've conceded all of our pieces of evidence that indicates that the only thing that Japan cares about in terms of whether or not they're going to escalate in the future is United States direct support. They do not care about whether the United States is a direct leader across the entire world, whether or not they're solving issues, but whether or not they are helping Japan improve their military capacity, which means that they obviously do not. Their specific deterrence and deterrence theory doesn't respond to our specific evidence. Second is that I'll do the line by line here. Yes, it definitely turns case. The Baltics War. First off, the Baltics War does not outweigh because it does not matter as I'll prove on the case debate. But the next argument is that it does not turn the Baltic case. Yes, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if aid has already been given in the world of the affirmative plan. Archbishop's argument is that the plan then leads to aid not being serving as any deterrent purpose, because in a world where Japan would offensively strike and require the United States to develop tactical nuclear weapons in Southeast Asia and in that region, it means that the United States can no longer have as well of a deterrent in Europe, which Russia recognizes, which would lead to a window of opportunity that would allow for escalation. None of this was responded to in their last speech, which means you should not allow nuclear explanation. The next argument is credibility theory. The large framing issue is that the affirmative has applied a general principle of credibility that does not answer our internal link. Our evidence indicates that the only thing that Japan cares about is U.S. support for their country. That was the song evidence that was conceded in the Twizy and the 1AR. They conceded a couple of warrants. One, Japan just changed their constitution and started their military like 2 years ago, which means that the only thing they care about is United States support, which they've conceded is a bright line right now. They've conceded that Ukraine provides a ring because Biden provided assurances to Japan and other Asian allies right now, which means that the only issue is the affirmative plan when they provide European commitments that Japan does not foresee in the future. The next argument they made is that Asian countries want Ukraine, yes, but they do not want Baltics. There's a difference. Our evidence actually prices the same. Our one evidence indicates that obviously Ukraine was something that every Asian ally wanted because it is obviously a bipartisan initiative for every single country, but that does not mean that they would want European policy as well, which answers the Lincoln evidence because our evidence is much more specific. They say billions of Ukraine proves it's not hamstring. No, you've conceded the trade-off evidence that my partner read in the 1R, which indicates that political capital is a trade-off in the status quo. They say the affirmative solves. They say that the affirmative solves the nuclear umbrella. Look, if this is the case, then you could just vote negative on presumption because the affirmative's nuclear umbrella should because NATO's nuclear umbrella should prevent Russian escalation in the status quo. But as well as that, it does not because they've conceded that Japan doesn't apply to the nuclear umbrella because it is a question of them expanding in the future. Our evidence indicates that in a world where the United States does not support Japan realizes that the only way for them to stay relevant in the region is to increase offensive strike capabilities, which means that the U.S.'s nuclear umbrella does not matter. The case page. There is no reason that Russia would invade the Baltics. Our Lanaska 19 evidence says that because force ratios heavily favor NATO, because the Baltics are a part of NATO, and Article 5 means that one attack on one Baltic nation would lead to all 30 NATO countries responding, means that Russia would not attack to the Baltic countries. Russia knows this. It's the reason that for the past 14 months, even though they've invaded Ukraine, they have not even touched a border that is 300 miles away from Ukraine because they know that even if they invade Ukraine, or rather the Baltics in one area, it would lead to all 30 NATO countries responding. The second is that rhetoric does not equal action. Our CHSSA evidence, which they conceded, says that Russia does not have the capabilities to launch an attack in Ukraine, which was absolutely conceded for all the circuit judges in this round. They conceded this argument that Russia simply does not have the capabilities to expand. They are going to respond to this by saying that their evidence says that they have deployed missiles in the region. one, you've conceded that that doesn't matter because Putin always uses rhetoric to say that he will invade in a region in a region, but that does not actually lead to actual action. They say that the empirics proven by studies prove that Russia is aggressive and that they will be aggressive. All those empirics are in regions where NATO did not exist. For example, IR experts look at what happened in Ukraine in 2014, Donbass, etc., which were all regions that Russia invaded where NATO was not stationed. They conceded the pivotal switch we made in the war in North when we conceded that NATO deterrence is high right now, which means that in the status quo, Russia would not invade Ukraine, which also responds to the assurance disadvantage because there is no fast-paced proliferation if NATO deterrence solves right now. The EU kind of concede the permutation, not going for any theories or reason to reject the argument. They conceded that severance is a vote.
deterrence advantage. The deterrence advantage. The disadvantage. Is anyone not ready? Okay. Allied fears and proliferation are incoming. We control uniqueness for this debate. The fact that they've spent 15 seconds on this advantage means it's game over for them because this advantage straight turns and outweighs the disadvantage. We have not assured the weakest link in the chain sufficiently. The Baltic states have not received high technology, artificial intelligence capabilities. Our exercise and cooperation with them are one-off examples. And this has made our allies extremely fearful because the United States has shown that they're unwilling to protect the most needy allies in need. Russia's invasion of Ukraine upended norms essential to non-proliferation because the war showed that when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, that was what made invasion possible. This means that a litany of countries like Germany, France, including countries like Taiwan, South Korea, etc., are all considering pursuing nuclear bomb because they believe that it is only the nuclear bomb that can assure their security because the United States, because NATO did not do enough to assure our allies. Therefore, the plan is a necessary break from that view of the status quo where there's lots of fears about the Ukraine conflict, where our allies are considering pursuing nuclear weapons, and only the affirmative sends a massive signal to our allies that they no longer need to pursue nuclear weapons because we are willing to assure the allies that are most in need of our assistance. The impact calculus is that allied proliferation is faster. Their argument is about a fledgling military with just 2 years of a new military constitution trying to build up weaponry. Our impact is about countries already possessing civilian nuclear power plants that could be instantly upgraded to nuclear bombs. Countries like Germany, France, Taiwan, etc. already have the capabilities to do so in the short term, which means that our impact is far faster than the slow development of a new capability since they've said themselves that Japan's military is brand new. Allied proliferation also outweighs on scope. Their impact is only about Japan and South Korea and Asian allies, where our impact includes those countries as well as broader and other allies, not just those countries but elsewhere, which means that if you think that South Korean and then Japanese proliferation is bad, then our impact just outweighs on scope because our impact also includes German, France, and Taiwan. Miscalculation and proliferation, this wildfire proliferation dramatically increases the risk of miscalculation and conflict. The deterrence advantage. We will concede that alliance commitments check adversary aggression and that there is no Baltic invasion now. This takes out the impact to the disadvantage because arms racing will not escalate with China and North Korea since the United States has security guarantees with Japan and South Korea. This means that there's only a risk of proliferation to cause miscalculation, and there is no risk of China war because of the mutually assured destruction that they have cited, which means that miscalculation is the only scenario you should look at. The diplomatic disadvantage. The DipCap dissad is our second advantage. We control uniqueness because, as explained above, currently these countries are seeking to proliferate in the status quo. The only link evidence they've cited by name throughout the whole speech was song. They've dropped the rehighlighting of song through every single speech. The song evidence says that Asia wanted more commitments to Europe. The song evidence says that Asia wanted the United States to support Ukraine with more and more aid. The distinction and in turn are between Japan wanting to support Ukraine but not the Baltics makes negative sense because the same reason they want the US to support Ukraine, i.e. to demonstrate America's willingness to defend allies, is the reason why they want the United States and NATO to support the Baltics and the Eastern European allies as well. Even if there is some risk of a link, the link turn outweighs the link because 1, the number of non-Japan allies that will be reassured from proliferating outweighs numerically, and 2, their evidence agrees with us that Japan cares less about physical resources and more about diplomacy and fueling the support. Their song and their Mohan evidence cards, which they've been harping about through every speech, are about U.S. statements that they will support our allies, not literal physical support, which indicates that Japan cares about what America signals more than what America literally provides, which means the pan signal of America's willingness to defend allies outweighs the, at best, slight decline in material assistance. Citing that Japan has only a military for 2 years goes affirmative because it proves that for decades they were satisfied with America's nuclear umbrella. It also proves that the time frame is extremely slow and that it cannot turn the affirmative because it proves that the affirmative's expansion of resources will be sufficient to guarantee the safety and acknowledgement of our allies, which deters proliferation. Credibility theory is empirical true. The Brooks evidence has 2 centuries of data that show that when the United States has assisted allies in one region, that has spillover effects that has allowed our allies to be soothed elsewhere. Specifically in the context of Asia, NATO has Asian-Pacific partnerships, and they have exchanged and conversations with them, which means that when we assist NATO, that's also seen as assisting Japan, because Japan will color the perceptions through the depth of the U.S. commitment to NATO, which means that when we assist NATO, that also is seen as indirectly assisting Japan. This is the reason why we have allies across the globe. There is no way America has the capability to support all of these countries, but it is through assisting some allies that we are able to show the other allies that we are willing to cooperate with them.
Thank you.